The notification lit my phone at 6:17 in the morning. I saw my own face staring back at me from the lock screen preview, the photo they used for my byline at the paper. The headline beneath it read, "Local journalist dies at 44." My thumb hovered over the glass for 3 seconds before I opened it. The article was detailed. Date of birth, correct. Hometown, correct. My career spanning 2 decades, the awards, the investigations that had cost me sleep and occasionally safety. They quoted my editor calling me dedicated and principled. They quoted my ex-wife saying I was complicated but brilliant. They even mentioned the scar above my left eyebrow from a high school baseball injury. Survived by 1 son, the article said, and my chest went cold. I read it twice, then a 3rd time, and my coffee sat untouched on the nightstand while my pulse ticked steady in my throat. I was supposed to interview a city councilman in 2 hours. I had showered and dressed and was reviewing my notes when my phone rang. It was my editor, Marcus. His voice sounded careful. "Have you seen it?" "I've seen it," I said. There was a pause. "We're trying to figure out who posted it. It went up on the wire service feed somehow. We've already gotten calls." I asked him what kind of calls, and he said the kind people make when someone dies. Condolences, requests for comment, someone from the mayor's office asking about memorial details. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my reflection in the dresser mirror. Gray at the temples, but otherwise intact. Breathing. Present. "I'll handle it," I told Marcus, and ended the call before he could ask me how. I live alone now, have for 3 years since the divorce. The house is small, a rental in a neighborhood where people keep to themselves. I stood in the kitchen and made a second pot of coffee, not because I needed it, but because the ritual kept my hands occupied. The mug was warm between my palms. Outside the window, a neighbor walked his dog past my driveway. Life continued in its ordinary way, indifferent to the fact that somewhere in the digital ether I had been declared dead. The obituary had details no journalist would include without confirmation. It mentioned the baseball scar. It referenced a trip I took to Honduras in my 20s that never made it into any public profile. It quoted my ex-wife, using phrases she had said to me in private arguments, the kind of language you don't share with reporters. Someone had assembled this with precision and intimacy, and that narrowed the field considerably. I called my ex-wife, Karen. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice tight. "Did you give a quote to anyone about me?" "What are you talking about?" I explained, kept my tone even. She went quiet. Then she said no, she hadn't spoken to any reporters. She asked if I was all right, and I told her I was fine, just trying to understand. She said she had seen the article that morning, thought it was some kind of sick prank. I asked her who else might know those details about our marriage, and she hesitated before saying, "My son might, if he had overheard us back then." I thanked her and hung up. My son's name is Peter. He turned 22 last month. We hadn't spoken in 6 weeks, not since a disagreement over money. He had asked for help with rent, and I had said no, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I believed he needed to solve it himself. He had called me cold. I had called him entitled. The conversation ended with him saying he didn't need anything from me, and I had let the silence stand, waiting for him to come around. I called him now. It went to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back, said it was urgent. Then I opened my laptop and started pulling threads. The obituary had been posted at 5:43 in the morning, uploaded directly to the regional wire service that syndicated content to news outlets across 3 states. That required credentials, a login, someone with access to the system. I had worked in newsrooms long enough to know those logins were guarded, but not impossible to obtain, especially if you knew the right people or had a reason to be trusted. I checked my own accounts, email, social media, bank records. Everything appeared normal. No unauthorized logins, no strange activity. But the obituary itself was live on a dozen websites now, cached and spreading, and I could feel the momentum of it like a wave building offshore. The city councilman interview was in an hour. I decided to go. I dressed in the same clothes I had planned, a button-down and slacks, and drove across town to the municipal building. When I arrived, the councilman's assistant met me in the lobby and told me the interview had been postponed. She didn't look at me directly, and when I asked why, she said only that the councilman's schedule had changed. I thanked her and left, and the weight of it settled in my chest like a stone. By noon, 3 more interviews had been canceled, 1 by email, 2 by phone. The reasons varied, but the tone was the same, a polite distance that hadn't been there before. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop and called Marcus again. "People think you're dead," he said, "even after we posted the retraction." I asked what retraction, and he said they had issued a statement within an hour of the original post, clarifying that I was alive and the obituary was an error. But the retraction hadn't traveled as far or as fast. It never does. "I need to know who posted it," I said. Marcus sighed. "We're working on it. The wire service is investigating. But these things take time." Time was something I didn't have. I could feel my credibility eroding by the hour, my professional identity fracturing under the weight of a lie I hadn't told. I thanked Marcus and drove home, and on the way, I thought about who had the means and the motive to do this. The means required technical access or a convincing impersonation. The motive required anger or ambition, something personal enough to justify the effort. I ran through names in my head. Colleagues, rivals, people I had written about unfavorably in articles. None of them fit the specifics, the intimate knowledge required to make the obituary credible. Peter's name kept surfacing. I didn't want it to be him, but the details in the article, the timing of it, our recent fight, it all pointed in one direction. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment with the engine running, staring at the house that felt emptier now than it had that morning. Inside, I made a list. I wrote down every fact in the obituary that wasn't public knowledge: the baseball scar, the Honduras trip, the private quotes from Karen, the phrasing about my son, the way it emphasized his independence and resilience, as if to suggest I had been absent or insufficient. Each detail was a breadcrumb, and together they formed a trail. I called Peter again, still no answer. I sent a text this time, brief and direct. "Need to talk. Call me." Then I opened my laptop and started searching. Peter had a social media presence, sparse but visible. Photos from college, a few posts about music and travel. I scrolled through his recent activity and found nothing unusual, no signs of distress or unusual behavior. But then I noticed something. A post from 3 days ago, a photo of him at a coffee shop with another man, older, maybe mid-30s. The caption said, "Learning from the best." The man's face was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. I reverse-searched the image and found a match. The man's name was Derek Lang, a freelance journalist who had worked briefly at my paper 2 years ago. He had been let go after a plagiarism scandal, a minor one, but enough to end his career at any reputable outlet. I hadn't thought about him in months, but now the connection clicked into place. Derek had been bitter after the firing. He had blamed me, said I had been too harsh in my assessment when management asked for my opinion. I'd told them the truth, that his work was careless and unethical, and he had left the paper carrying a grudge. If Peter had met him, if Derek had seen an opportunity to settle a score through my son, the pieces fit. I called the wire service directly and asked to speak with their security team. After 2 transfers, I reached a woman named Lisa who handled access logs. I explained the situation, gave her my credentials, and asked if she could check for any unusual activity on the morning the obituary was posted. She said she would look into it and call me back. While I waited, I drove to the coffee shop from Peter's photo. It was a small place near the university, crowded with students and freelancers tapping on laptops. I ordered a tea I didn't drink and sat near the window, watching. After 20 minutes, I saw Derek walk in. He ordered, sat at a corner table, and opened his laptop. I waited 5 more minutes, then walked over. "Derek," I said. He looked up, and his face shifted through surprise and something else, something colder. "Didn't expect to see you here." I didn't expect to see my obituary this morning either. He leaned back in his chair, studied me. "That's unfortunate." I sat down across from him without asking. "You posted it." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You used my son to get the details. You convinced him to help you." Derek's expression didn't change, but his fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. "Your son has his own grievances. I just listened. And then you weaponized them." He shrugged. "You destroyed my career. I thought it was only fair to return the favor." I kept my voice level. You used stolen credentials to post false information on a wire service. That's fraud. It's criminal. Prove it. I didn't respond immediately. I watched him, noted the confidence in his posture, the casual arrogance. He thought he had insulated himself, used Peter as a buffer, but he had made a mistake. He had underestimated the trail he left behind. I stood. I will. Back in my car, I called Lisa at the wire service. She answered on the second ring and told me she had found something. The obituary had been posted using credentials that belonged to a reporter who had left the organization a year ago. The login had come from an IP address registered to a coffee shop near the university. Can you send me the details? I asked. I can forward them to your editor and let him handle it from there. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Marcus and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said he would contact the wire service's legal team and file a complaint. He asked if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes. Peter finally called me that evening. His voice sounded defensive before I even spoke. What do you want? I want to know why you helped Derek Lang write my obituary. Silence. Then, I didn't write anything. But you gave him the information. Another pause. He said he was working on a profile about you. He said it would help your reputation. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. His voice cracked slightly. You never talk about yourself. I thought maybe if someone else told your story, people would understand you better. I sat at my kitchen table and closed my eyes. Peter, he used you. He used what you told him to try to destroy my career. I didn't know. I know you didn't, but the damage is real. We talked for another 10 minutes. He apologized, stumbling over the words but meaning them. I told him I wasn't angry at him, which was mostly true. I was angry at Derek, at the system that allowed this kind of manipulation, at the fragility of reputation in a digital age. But Peter was young, and he'd been used by someone who knew how to exploit hurt feelings and distance. After we hung up, I poured a glass of water and stood at the sink, looking out at the dark street. The house was quiet. The neighbor dog barked once, then stopped. I thought about trust, and how easily it fractures, how a single lie can ripple outward and reshape everything. The next morning, Marcus called to say the wire service had taken down the obituary entirely and issued a formal apology. Derek Lang had been identified as the source of the fraudulent post, and legal proceedings were underway. The wire service was cooperating fully, and Marcus said it was likely Derek would face criminal charges for fraud and unauthorized access to a secured system. I spent the day reaching out to contacts, rebuilding connections that had been disrupted by the false report. Most people were understanding once they heard the full story. A few remained wary, skeptical in a way that would take time to repair. I accepted that. Trust is built slowly and broken quickly, and I had learned that lesson more than once. Peter and I met for coffee a week later. He looked thinner, tired. He apologized again, and I told him it was enough. We talked about other things, normal things, and by the end of the hour, some of the distance between us had narrowed. Not gone, but less sharp. Derek Lang was charged with criminal fraud and unauthorized computer access. The case moved through the system with the slow efficiency of legal processes, and I testified when required. The judge ruled in favor of prosecution, and Derek received a sentence that included probation and restitution. He didn't apologize, didn't express remorse. Some people never do. I returned to work, filed my stories, rebuilt my reputation one article at a time. The obituary still existed in cached corners of the internet, searchable for anyone curious enough to look. But the truth was documented too, the retraction and the explanation, and over time, the false narrative faded into background noise. I think about that morning often, the shock of seeing my own face paired with the word dies. It was a violation, an erasure, an attempt to replace me with a version of myself that didn't exist. But I had survived it, not through luck, but through patience and precision, through the same skills that had made me a journalist in the first place. Peter and I talk more now, not every day but regularly. He's more careful about who he trusts, more skeptical of easy answers. I tell him that's a good thing, that skepticism is a tool when used correctly. He listens, and sometimes I see my younger self in him, the version that believed integrity mattered more than convenience. The house is still quiet at night, still empty in the way a single person's home is. But it's mine, and the life I live in it is real, measured in small routines and deliberate choices. I wake each morning and check my phone, read the news without fear that my name will appear where it doesn't belong. The world continues, indifferent and immense, and I continue with it. There's a line I remember from an article I wrote years ago, something about resilience being less about strength and more about refusing to let others define your ending. I didn't know then how literal that would become, but I know now, and I carry it with me, a reminder that the story isn't finished until you stop telling it yourself.